to 7 destinations in our solar system to see just where these creatures could be and what they might look like. These exotic lands are unimaginably harsh. Life as we think of it would perish in an instant. But alien life may be far tougher than we expect, as we're learning from a surprising group of living things right here on Earth. Until just a few decades ago, we were sure our planet was unique. It is the only one we've found so far that has nurtured the evolution of millions of species. Thanks to its abundant sunshine, warm water, and protective atmosphere. We logically concluded that life needed each of those things, a conclusion that ruled out all other known worlds in our solar system. But then, biologists began combing some of the Earth's darkest and coldest places. And to their surprise, they found living, breathing creatures. Biologists call these organisms extremophiles. Some don't need light or oxygen. Others survive in tremendous atmospheric pressure. It seems life can turn up practically anywhere. Take Antarctica. After years of searching this arid, frozen landscape, scientists doubted they'd find anything alive. But in 1999, a team of explorers unearthed a rock from 6 feet under the ice. What they found amazed them. When they cracked the rock open, they found it teeming with tiny creatures. Here, at temperatures of 68 degrees below zero and 6 feet under solid ice, life had found a foothold.
Biologists have been increasingly discovering life, not kangaroos, but, simpler forms of life that live at very cold temperatures, very high temperatures, very great pressures, even in places where there's sort of a high degree of radiation. It turns out life is able to live in a much wider variety of environments on our own planet than we used to think.
And if life can survive extreme conditions, not just here at home, but elsewhere in our solar system, think of what this could mean.
Unless there's something extraordinarily miraculous about our solar system or our planet, then life has got to be extremely commonplace. I mean, there's got to be large numbers of worlds with life, and some of them would have cooked up intelligent life.
In the beginning, our Earth was as deadly a planet as any. Over the first billion years of Earth's existence, cosmic debris pummeled it mercilessly. The impacts turned its surface into a broiling, seething inferno where life was impossible. But once the solar system settled down and the Earth began to cool, water appeared, setting the stage for life. In 1953, researcher Stanley Miller proved in a lab experiment just how easily life on Earth got its start. He combined water with hydrogen, methane, and ammonia, components of the Earth's early atmosphere. Then he zapped his solution with an electric charge to simulate lightning. His results shocked the world. Miller had created organic molecules called amino acids, the protein building blocks of all living things. If lightning helped jumpstart life on Earth, could it have done the same on other planets? Galactic probes have now found the ingredients in Miller's experiment throughout our solar system, including one essential to life.
One of the requirements that every form of life that we know about on Earth has, every single one, is liquid water. We've used evidence for liquid water to kind of guide our search for habitable environments.
Our safari is headed to 7 worlds, some possibly rich in water, where scientists believe aliens might be hiding. While any life there might have begun much like life on Earth, how it looks now is anyone's guess. We begin in the world that has always fired our imaginations, the planet right next door, Mars. Of all the planets where we've looked for life, it's the one we've studied most. The scientist who may get the first look at Martians, if they're found, is Steve Squires, principal investigator for NASA's Mars rovers.
Mars has always had, among all the planets, I think, a special fascination for humans. For a very long time, we've known enough about Mars to know that it is probably the most Earth-like.
It may be the most like Earth, with an atmosphere and seasons, but we humans would perish quickly on Mars. Its air is thin, 40 times thinner than the air at the top of Mount Everest. And it sits in a bad neighborhood of our solar system, near an asteroid belt. Its atmosphere is too flimsy to protect it. Asteroids continually bombard its surface. Violent winds can whip Mars's sandy soil into storms that consume the entire planet for weeks and spawn tornadoes 8 kilometers high. Midday temperatures at the equator of 1 degree Celsius fall to -70 at night. David Grinspoon is a curator of astrobiology at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. As he sees it, Mars would be warmer if it wasn't a planetary runt.
When I grab coffee on a cold morning, I know that a small espresso is going to cool off quickly, whereas a larger coffee is going to stay warm much longer. Large objects stay warm longer because their interiors are shielded from the outside where the cooling occurs. And planets are exactly the same way. A small planet will cool off early in its history. A larger planet like Earth will stay warm for billions of years, which makes it a better place probably to look for life.
Despite Mars's drawbacks, it has always fascinated scientists because its terrain seemed to give evidence that it might support life. Its dynamic landscape of mountains, volcanoes, and deep ravines is not unlike our Earth. To early astronomers, these features look like oceans and rivers, and even a system of canals, supposedly not just supporting life, but actually produced by it.
Percival Lowell in the United States observed these things and inferred that, in fact, these things were so straight and so regular in geometry that they had to have been the product of intelligent life. Okay? Well, he was right. The problem was the life was at the wrong end of the telescope. In viewing this thing visually through a telescope eyepiece, the human eye-brain combination started to connect things that weren't really there.
Lowell was not alone. Some scientists were shocked when the probe Viking 1 beamed back this image. Is that a human face? Perhaps produced by Martians in their own likeness? Until recently, we've never really known where to look in our solar system for extraterrestrial life. But we've always known what the aliens would be like once we found them.
Consciousness. I was on a table.
Usually, there is more than a hint of the Earthling in our aliens. Hostile or lovable, they tend to resemble mutant images of ourselves. As a senior astronomer at the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute in California, Seth Shostak has spent his career listening for the radio waves of a distant alien society.
There's no reason to assume that they're going to look like us or even think like us or behave like us or have language. you know, you just have to look at the variety of life on Earth and you see that, you know, nature can come up with lots of different forms.
But if there is life on Mars, how could it survive in such extreme conditions? Since the 1960s, scientists have sent dozens of probes to the Red Planet. The first pictures of the barren landscape quickly dashed any hope of finding intelligent beings. But what scientists did see startled them. Though there's no evidence of Martian-made canals, there are signs that Mars actually may have had water. Some think the angry red planet might once have been blue.
You just have to look back a couple of billion years, 3.5 billion, 4 billion years ago. Mars had a thicker atmosphere, had water on its surface clearly. Maybe it developed life. And as it slowly went bad, you know, the life had to adapt.
Life may have adapted, not died off, because some liquid water may still exist underground. But with no surface water, frigid temperatures, and ultra-thin atmosphere, Mars is a planet only one kind of creature could love, an extremophile. Extremophiles thrive in the cruelest of places. To see where they might lurk on Mars, we head to the Valles Marineris, a massive rift in Mars's surface, 20 times wider than the Grand Canyon in places, and almost as deep as Mount Everest is tall. Lakes may have once flooded this valley, and those lakes could have hosted life. As the water dried up, life could have evolved to cope with the harsher environment. We won't know what these extremophiles are like until we find them. But they may resemble creatures that exist in extreme places right here on Earth. An unusual team of biologists, called astrobiologists, study Earth for the kinds of life we may find in outer space. Astrobiologist Rocco Mancinelli is on the hunt for Mars's extremophiles.
If it went beneath the surface, and some of it undoubtedly did, then what happened to it? Well, it formed brine pockets. So what kind of organism can live in a salty brine? A salt-loving organism.
Astrobiologist Chris McKay thinks he knows the kind of salt-loving creatures that might survive on Mars. Creatures much like those he's found in one of the driest, saltiest places on Earth.
The fundamental challenge to life on Mars is, in a sense, the fundamental challenge of life here in Death Valley. It's dryness. That is the hardest thing for life to adapt to.
Thousands of years ago, a salty lake covered Death Valley, just as lakes filled Mars's Mariner Trench.
Moving closer. This is still wet, a little wet.
This appears like a lifeless place, a big, flat, white, empty horizon. But yet, just below the surface, we find layers of algae and bacteria growing. They're living in an environment that in many ways is fundamentally different from the environment that we sense on the surface. Here you're in a place which looks lifeless, looks dead, and yet you dig down and hidden underneath, there it is.
Beneath the salt is a layer of hardy green algae that survive on the water and light that trickle through. The algae in turn feed salt-loving microorganisms.
Here in deserts on Earth, dried, salty lake beds, we're going to find them on Mars as well.
Salty deserts are not the only places life might be hiding on the red planet. There are Mars's tremendous volcanoes, some of them 6 times larger than those on Earth. Astrobiologist Penny Boston studies the caves, called lava tubes, left over after volcanic lava has dissipated. Not long ago, we assumed caves like these were devoid of life. They get no sunlight, and no sunlight means no photosynthesis. But in lava tubes outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, Boston has found evidence of extreme life.
Because we know Mars has many, many lava tubes. And so here we have the opportunity to see how these formed and also to look at the life that inhabits them.
The extremophiles Boston has found appear to be thriving. They get their energy by feeding on the minerals in the cave wall.
So here we're up close to the wall, and you can see these white patches here growing against the black basalt. And each one of these is like a major city for these little guys. They're all nestled in these little pockets in the basalt. And so these guys are permanently adapted to these freezing temperatures. They never see any light, and they get what they can find in the environment.
Are there creatures like these in the caves below Mars's volcano fields? Boston thinks so.
We are going to find life, and I just hope that I live a long and healthy life so that I can still be around to see that.
We may already have had our first glimpse of Martians, not from our visit to their planet, but from their visit to ours. 16 million years ago, an asteroid slammed into Mars and propelled a 2-kilogram rock into space. Amazingly, that rock sailed to Earth and came to rest in Antarctica. Inside, NASA scientist David McKay and Everett Gibson were amazed to spot the outlines of fossils. Water has carved small tunnels in the rock. And in these tunnels, McKay and Gibson found what they believe to be evidence of bacterial life.
These are little microbes, and they're dead, and they're fossils, or in some cases, we don't even see the forms. We see the footprints or the evidence that they were there.
Life from Mars? Maybe. The hunt is only just beginning. NASA plans to send a rover called Phoenix to Mars. It will study the planet's ice cap and probe 3 feet beneath the surface. NASA even has a plan to send human visitors. They may not meet the little green men of our imaginations, but they could encounter life in some form. What will it look like? It is likely to be a subterranean dweller with an ability to survive on little water. Perhaps an organism with a taste for minerals, like the creatures in the lava tubes of New Mexico. Even the smallest find would have enormous implications. Proof that life is not unique to Earth, but exists just next door. Our safari to the places in our solar system likely to harbor alien life now takes us past the asteroid belt on the far side of Mars. Here, Jupiter reigns. But this planet, the largest in our solar system, is fairly hostile to life, thanks to its toxic gases and overpowering gravity.
Not only is it pretty cold out at Jupiter, it's also, it's got this really thick atmosphere, tens of thousands of miles thick, and it's got ammonia and methane and, things used to clean the bathroom. But Jupiter has more than 60 moons that we know about.
At first glance, those moons would seem unlikely places to seek alien life. Their atmospheres are thin, and they are inhumanly cold. The temperature on Callisto is lower than minus 200 degrees Celsius. The scientific probes Voyager and Galileo have detected little on the surface of these moons but ice, with one dramatic exception. Io is one of the closest moons to Jupiter. When NASA sent Voyager 1 to Io in 1979, astronomers were astonished to find its surface roiling with giant volcanoes.
Io is the most volcanically active place in the solar system, just spewing volcanic material from its surface all the time.
What could be heating the interior of this frigid moon? Amazingly, it's the force of gravity from Jupiter. The giant planet exerts enormous gravitational pull on its moons. The closer the moon, the stronger the force. So strong, it can actually stretch their crusts. But some of these moons have elliptical orbits, so as they near Jupiter, the crust stretches towards it. When they move further away, the crust relaxes back towards spherical. This constant tidal movement creates friction deep inside, and that friction generates heat. It's like rubbing two sticks together to start a fire. The pull of Jupiter is heating Io from the inside out. Volcanic fumes and lack of water make Io inhospitable to life. But Jupiter's other large moons are more distant, close enough for Jupiter's gravity to warm them from within, but distant enough to remain calm on the surface. 3 of them look particularly promising as possible homes for alien life. The one furthest from the giant planet, Callisto. On its surface, Callisto looks like our moon, scarred and cratered by countless hits from asteroids. Those impacts may have melted the surface ice for brief periods, allowing life to take hold. But in 1998, the Galileo spacecraft detected a much more promising incubator deep beneath Callisto's surface. Radioactive rocks and tremendous pressure in its core generate heat inside Callisto. The heat may be melting its icy crust from below, creating a hidden ocean. And hidden oceans could mean hidden life. As we fly closer to Jupiter, we find its largest moon, Ganymede. Ganymede is also deeply scarred. Ridges rise above its surface. Those bright spots are craters as big as 5 kilometers across and likely to be lined with frost. But these photos offer the most compelling clues to where life here might hide. They show flowing glaciers, glaciers that resemble those on Earth. Ganymede's moving glaciers could also be signs of heat within. So, like Callisto, Ganymede could also have a hidden ocean, buried beneath as much as 190 kilometers of ice. The third moon on this leg of our alien safari is the most intriguing. It is called Europa, and of the 3, it resides closest to Jupiter. That proximity to the giant planet means Europa's core may be very hot, far hotter than Callisto's or Ganymede's. But its surface remains frigid, a potent combination for life, since there could be a temperate zone where they meet. Mammoth fissures scar Europa's thick crust of ice, a sign that ice is always shifting. On our own planet, we see the same cracks in the ice sheets covering the Arctic Ocean. Europa's crust may be riding the largest ocean in the solar system, an ocean twice as large as all of Earth's put together.
Now those oceans, if they're there, and the chances are pretty good that at least some of them are, they've been sitting around for a long time, 4 billion years, a little longer, right? In 4 billion years, an ocean of water, do you think anything might have cooked up there? Well, it certainly seems plausible.
The environment in Europa's ocean is more or less as nice as the environment in our own ocean, as a place for living things to exist. Heck, things from planet Earth could probably live in the European ocean.
But Europa's oceans would be very cold, even slushy. And sunlight never penetrates them, thanks to an icy cover that may be 16 kilometers thick. We might never have thought life could exist here if not for a revolutionary discovery off the coast of Ecuador. Deep in the Pacific, biologists have found flourishing communities of tube worms, crabs, and even squid. These creatures are thriving despite complete darkness, extreme cold, and the pressure of the deep ocean. They feed on bacteria that take their energy not from the sun, but from chemicals erupting from the sea floor. We might find very similar volcanic vents on Europa, supporting their own web of life. To find out, NASA scientists would like to put a lander on the Europan surface. Some would like to send a cryobot, a robot that would melt the ice and release a probe into the liquid below.
That's not so hard to do. You just have to melt your way through. But you're going to have to melt your way through not a couple hundred feet, but maybe a dozen miles of ice. And send down a fishing line with maybe a video camera and a light bulb on it and look around.
In all that water, we can't rule out the possibility that very simple life forms have evolved further. We might even find creatures as advanced as some here at home. Most likely, however, we would find microbes. But even that would be a sea change in how we view the birth and growth of life. Europa was warm. What if a place is one of the coldest known? Or if its lakes flow with toxic chemicals instead of water? These are the worlds we find as our safari continues even deeper into space. As our safari in search of alien life sweeps by the ringed planet, Saturn, we can see the violently swirling gases that choke its atmosphere. We can also feel Saturn's gravity, weaker than Jupiter's, but still formidable. We'll keep moving. We're not likely to find living things here. Saturn's rings are also extremely inhospitable. They're made of rock and ice, as small as a grain of sugar or as big as a house. But Saturn has many moons, 56 that we've spotted so far. Our safari heads first to one of those moons, a tiny frigid satellite called Enceladus, just 500 kilometers in diameter. Here, gravity is very weak, a fraction of that on Earth. And Enceladus has hardly any atmosphere. It reflects back into space almost all the sunlight that hits it, making it the shiniest object in our solar system. Until very recently, we also thought Enceladus was too cold to support life. It appears we were wrong. In 2005, after a 7-year journey, the Cassini spacecraft approached the tiny moon and detected something that stunned the mission's principal investigator, Caroline Porco.
So this was the picture that just, grabbed us. Just was shocking.
Those are plumes made of water from a geyser. The geyser's steam and hot water hit the cold vacuum of space and explode into a jet of ice. With little gravity to rein it in, the ice cloud can grow as big as Enceladus itself. Porco has never seen anything like it anywhere else.
It's like a planetary explorer's dream to come upon a body like Enceladus. Those jets, those fountains, if you will, just spewing vapor and icy snow hundreds of kilometers above the south pole of Enceladus.
There's only one conclusion. Tiny, frigid Enceladus is piping hot within. Like Jupiter, Saturn's giant gravitational field tugs on its satellites, creating friction and heat within.
As far as we can tell now, it seems like an inescapable conclusion that there may be liquid water deeper down on Enceladus because it's warm. And the best models we can put forth right now to even explain the warmth, much less the jets, seem to indicate that you would get temperatures warm enough to melt water.
Heat, liquid water, even the furthest reaches of our solar system may contain the chemistry for life. What kind of creature could live in the steamy waters of a geyser? Thanks to hot springs back on Earth, we have some idea. At one point, we assumed nothing lived in the steam-driven fountains of Yellowstone National Park. But then, biologists discovered microbes in these waters. Microbes that feed on chemicals dissolved in the water. Today, we call them thermophiles. The hardiest can thrive in boiling water. Could there be thermophiles on Enceladus? To find out, our safari takes us in for a close-up of this extraterrestrial Old Faithful. It's too cold for anything to live near the surface, but temperatures there are minus 165 degrees Celsius. But what about the hot water inside? In the ice plume above Enceladus, Cassini's probes have found carbon dioxide and methane, chemicals that could feed life below. Just as the chemical-laden springs of Yellowstone feed microbes living there.
We have a body that very, very likely has liquid water in its interior, has shown us already it's got simple organic compounds and, you know, a whole host of things that make it, I think, a major body of astrobiological interest in our solar system.
If Enceladus has been a shock, astronomers have been astounded by another of Saturn's moons, Titan. It may be the unlikeliest to harbor life. Titan gets only a limited amount of sunlight, about 1,000th as much as Earth. Probes sent to Titan have detected ice, but no liquid water. And at temperatures of minus 138 degrees Celsius, that ice is hard as stone. What could possibly make Titan a promising environment for alien life? Remarkably, Titan in many ways resembles the Earth, but not the one we know now.
Titan has turned out to be the body fantastic in the Saturn system, which is long suspected of having an environment at the surface, not only similar to the kind of environment we find here on Earth, even, believe it or not, similar to the kind of environment we had on Earth before the emergence of life.
Titan intrigued Carolyn and Porco's team so much, they directed the Cassini spacecraft to send a probe there in 2005. It was the most distant surface mission ever conducted. The probe saw just ridges and plains. But a later flyover by Cassini spotted a shoreline. Soon, thousands of lakes came into view, at least one bigger than the Great Lakes of North America. It's the first time we've ever detected liquid on the surface of another celestial body.
Kind of looks like Minnesota, except the lakes are not water. They're liquid natural gas. But liquid natural gas is a liquid.
And that's not snow. Those are methane flakes. Like Earth, Titan has weather. But it's of a rather psychedelic kind. There are even methane hurricanes.
It's not water, it's methane, doing all the exact same things. Raining, evaporating, flowing in rivers. So you have something that is basically doing what water does on Earth. On Titan, only it's methane.
A similar scene may have existed on Earth 4 billion years ago, making scientists suspect that Titan could also be an incubator for life.
Chemistry does go on. At those cold temperatures, it's really slow. But Titan has had 4 billion years in which to do some chemistry, and maybe in that period of time, maybe something is cooked up.
It would have to cook up without liquid water, something we've never seen before. But scientists aren't ruling it out. The substitute could be the methane, so abundant on Titan. Used for fuel on Earth, methane was long thought poisonous to all life. But in 1997, researchers examined mounds of methane ice in the Gulf of Mexico, and they were astonished to find colonies of small, centipede-like worms thriving amid the frozen substance. They think the worms may eat bacteria that feed on the methane.
In general, things that we think of as deadly, many of them are potentially lively. If you can figure out an evolutionary way to tap into that energy rather than having it destroy you, then it can be bountiful.
There could be one more complication for life on the surface of Titan. With only a weak magnetic field to shield it, living things on the surface could be exposed to cosmic radiation. But that might not be a problem for an extremophile, as we found here on Earth. Biologists have uncovered plenty of life near Chernobyl's contaminated nuclear reactor, and even swimming in toxic radioactive spills, actually feeding off the decaying molecules. It's possible Titan's life forms could do the same. To find life on Titan, we may have to dive into its methane lakes, where we might find chemical-loving bacteria. We may even find microbes resistant to radiation, not unlike those here on Earth at Chernobyl, living on its rock-hard ice sheets. Organisms that eat methane might give off heat, melting the ice, possibly creating another fountain for life. There's no doubt, life on Titan would be a strange brew. But we have yet to visit the most bizarre world where scientists believe life could exist, and it's much closer to home. Our safari of the world's most likely to harbor alien life has taken us far. We've visited frigid deserts, submerged oceans, and methane lakes. But the world we are about to visit may be the most extreme of all. For our final stop, we are turning back toward Earth, to Venus, our closest planetary neighbor in the solar system. If life can survive here, it seems it could exist almost everywhere. To reach the surface of Venus, we have to fly through a dense layer of yellow clouds, 64 kilometers deep, with a composition similar to battery acid. The atmosphere here is 90 times heavier than Earth's, too heavy for a human to tolerate. On the ground, there are extinct volcanoes and lava flows as far as the eye can see. They cover 85% of the planet's surface. It is hard to believe Venus once had vast oceans.
You basically had a runaway greenhouse effect, where as it starts to get warmer, the oceans start to evaporate, and then that puts water vapor in the air. Well, water vapor is a potent greenhouse gas, so that's what leads to the runaway. The oceans basically boil off, and then the CO2 all ends up in the atmosphere, and so today you have this very hot, hyper greenhouse planet.
With temperatures around 460 degrees Celsius, Venus is even hotter than Mercury, the planet closest to the Sun. Not a surface hospitable to life.
Life as we know it cannot exist on the surface of Venus, because organic molecules would just be ripped to shreds by the hot gases.
But we've stopped here, not because of what's on the ground, but what's in the air. In 1982, the Soviet spacecraft Venera 14 visited Venus. In the clouds, 50 kilometers up, it detected temperatures much cooler than on the surface. What's more, it found the molecules so critical for life, H2O. So far, every bit of water we've found beyond Earth is frozen solid. Only in the clouds above Venus have we found it in vapor form, a possible incubator for life. But Venus's clouds are also filled with highly acidic sulfur. Once, we thought nothing could live in sulfur. But scientists have analyzed some of the most acidic water on Earth, leaching from a California mine.
Watch your head,
In sulfuric acid strong enough to erode metal, eat through clothing, and dissolve human flesh, they found life. Acid-loving extremophiles. These organisms feed on sulfur compounds, like iron sulfide, eating the iron and emitting the highly acidic sulfur. Do extremophiles like these float above Venus? Astrobiologist David Grinspoon likes to think it's possible.
Maybe in the clouds of Venus there are some sulfur-based organisms. Sulfur actually absorbs ultraviolet light in interesting ways, and I'm just imagining that there's maybe some kind of photochemical reaction going on where ultraviolet light is actually being used to convert chemicals into some higher energy state, which then is basically being eaten.
What will these aliens be like if we do find them? They would have to tolerate high temperatures and enormous atmospheric pressure. They would also need to thrive in acid concentrations deadly to most life forms. Perhaps they might resemble a hardier version of the acid-resistant extremophiles in California's mine.
We keep finding that life lives in places that we used to think were inhospitable. So whenever we say, oh, it's impossible, you couldn't have life in the clouds of Venus, I think we have to be very careful because they might just reflect our own ignorance or our limitations on our own imagination, and maybe not real limitations on the ultimate creativity of nature, which seems to find solutions to these problems.
As our safari returns to the cool, blue, lush and lively world of Earth, we can see why we so revere its life-sustaining gifts. But, as we are learning, even the most extreme environments can harbor living things. Extremophiles may resemble the first version of life in our universe, and they could even be the most common. Could they have evolved further from these humble beginnings? Could intelligent life be out there as well? For more than 40 years, scientists at the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute in California have been searching the skies for answers to that question. Astronomer Seth Shostak believes he'll know the sound of alien life when he hears it.
We have a couple of observing projects to try and find signals. The biggest one are our radio searches, and that's where we use big arrays of antennas, and we point these antennas at nearby star systems that we think, well, this is the kind of star that might have a planet that might be something like Earth. We point in those directions, hoping to pick up a signal that would tell us that somebody there is clever enough to build a radio transmitter.
It's a safari that never leaves home. Astronomers have also recently captured enough light from planets in distant solar systems to deduce their chemical makeup. They have found elements that may help form RNA, one of the building blocks of life here on Earth. And 20 light years away, in the constellation Libra, a team of European astronomers has found a planet that could be warm enough to have liquid water on its surface, just like Earth. Meanwhile, headed to the furthest reaches of our galaxy are 4 spacecraft launched in the 1970s. Aboard 2 of them is a map of our solar system and the image of a man and a woman. 2 others carry a sample of uranium, whose rate of decay would date the probe, regardless of language. The 2 are also carrying what could be the most universal message of all, a recording that includes a composition by Bach. Just don't expect news anytime soon. These intergalactic postcards from the Earth will take 80,000 years to reach the nearest star. Our search for life beyond Earth has only just begun. There are billions of planets yet to be explored. every one of them holds the tantalizing possibility of life. Even intelligent life.
Just in the face of this enormity, the idea that we're the only game in town, it just doesn't seem reasonable.
I think the question of whether we're alone is profoundly important for human beings in general. If you're aware, you really have to ask that question.
Somewhere in a galaxy known or unknown, something or someone could be looking out into space, peering at the Milky Way and wondering, is there life out there?
35 seconds. Let's go. Storage tank press closed.
March 6, 2009.
22 seconds. Later, GN2 pressure go.
This Delta II rocket is going through its final pre-flight check.
7.1.3. Drop 1.
Engine start, 1, 0, and liftoff.
It is the start of an extraordinarily ambitious mission. The Kepler Space Observatory is hunting for planets like Earth within a region of 100,000 stars. It is the culmination of a journey that began more than a decade ago with one of the most profound scientific discoveries ever made. (1995). Swiss astronomer Michel Mayor and his team make a routine observation of stars in the constellation Pegasus, located 50 light-years away. But the instruments show something strange. One star is violently lurching and wobbling.
What we discovered, it's one of these stars have a velocity changing with time.
What is powerful enough to disturb a star the size of our sun? Mayor offers a radical answer: a planet. But no one has ever seen a planet around another sun-like star.
Problem in detecting planets around other stars is that as a planet orbits a nearby star, that planet gets lost because of its feeble light in the glare of the very bright star.
In spite of the odds, Mayor relies on his data and is convinced the wobbles are caused by the gravitational pull of an orbiting planet.
When I read this claim from Michel Mayor, I was very skeptical. There had been many false claims of the first planet ever discovered around another star, and I thought to myself, oh boy, here we go again. So I decided to observe the star on 4 consecutive nights. And stunningly, the star was shown to wobble exactly as Michel Mayor had said.
Michel Mayor and his teammate Didier Queloz announced their discovery. It rocks the scientific community.
They had found for the first time reproducible, confirmable evidence of the existence of a planet around a sun-like star.
Officially called 51 Pegasi b, the planet is nicknamed Bellerophon in honor of the Greek hero who tamed the winged horse Pegasus. It is a planet that breaks all the rules. Bellerophon roasts in the blazing starlight at temperatures of roughly 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. It is nearly 150 times more massive than Earth and is a gas giant like Jupiter.
A gas giant is a planet made mostly of hydrogen and helium. Only the outer layers are gas, but inside, hydrogen and helium is compressed to huge, huge, huge pressures. It doesn't resemble a gas at all.
Unlike anything found in our solar system, this is an entirely new class of planet, what scientists call a hot Jupiter.
If you go to Hawaii and see the lava flow there, that's how hot a hot Jupiter is. It's very, very hot.
The Earth is a comfortable 93 million miles away from the Sun.
These hot Jupiters are roughly 100 times closer, and so the amount of sunlight that they get is 10,000 times larger.
If this represents a star, and this a hot Jupiter is 3 to 4 stellar diameters away from the star. So that would be 1, 2, 3. This is how close a hot Jupiter would be to its star. Hot Jupiters are tidally locked. They present the same face to the star at all times, just like the moon does to Earth.
It's going to be permanent daylight on one side and permanent nighttime on the back. If I were stuck on a hot Jupiter, I'd want to be on the back side and hope that some of the heat from the front side facing the star would make its way around the back.
The variations in temperature make Bellerophon's atmosphere extremely windy. The wind howls at thousands of miles per hour, far beyond anything we could ever withstand. The heat blast guarantees water vapor cannot exist. But that doesn't mean there is no rain.
It's far too hot for water liquid clouds to form here. But instead, these clouds would be made out of iron.
Iron vapor can exist at temperatures much higher than water. And because of that, things could get a little messy.
You better have an umbrella that's pretty sturdy, because the iron is going to start coating your umbrella very rapidly and making it extremely heavy and just crush that umbrella.
The sky overhead is filled with dancing curtains of color. Charged particles from the nearby star make auroras far more extreme than the northern lights on Earth. There is something even more unique about this newly discovered world. Bellerophon orbits its sun in a blistering 4.2 days.
No self-respecting planet goes around a star in 4.2 days. None of the planets in our solar system take such a short amount of time.
For scientists, the tiny orbit challenges long-held notions of how planets form.
The fact that the planet was orbiting every 4 days was a total puzzle until one night in the middle of the night I woke up and said, well, this must be proof that planets migrate inwards. They don't stay put where they are.
The key to the puzzle is found in how planets are made.
Planets are a byproduct of star formation. When stars form, they have a disk of dust and debris around them, and out of that debris, planets form.
Much of what we know comes from Hubble's Space Telescope, as it aims at regions like the Eagle Nebula. This interstellar cloud is studded with collapsing disks of dust and gas. A giant clump grows in the center of each disk. Temperatures reach a searing 18 million degrees. The same nuclear fusion that powers our sun is unleashed. The star is born. Radiation from the star generates a stellar wind that sweeps away leftover dust and debris. Some of the dust survives and remains in orbit around the newborn star. Over millions of years, the dust sticks together, forming knots that grow into asteroids, and the asteroids grow into planets. These planets migrate through the disk until they find a stable orbit. This is why Bellerophon is so close to its parent star. But one newly discovered world has found its stable orbit in a place no planet should ever go. Surprisingly, Hubble detects many of the basic chemicals needed for life. Sodium, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But Osiris is far too hot for life as we know it.
There may be other forms of life, however, that thrive on higher temperatures.
But there's no solid surface as we know it on a hot Jupiter. So this life would have to be just tiny little microbes floating around on aerosols. And on our own Earth, we have life that floats around in our atmosphere. But that life didn't start there. So life almost certainly would not exist on hot Jupiters.
Astronomers have discovered many hot Jupiters since Bellerophon was found in 1995. But conditions on these worlds rule them out as places where the drama of life can unfold. One of these gas giants is a planet that teases the rules of evolution. Astronomer Jeff Marcy discovers something shocking about a planet orbiting a star called 16 Cygnus b, located some 70 light-years away in the constellation of Cygnus, the Swan.
The planet was clearly in an elongated orbit, bringing the planet close to and then far from the host star. And this, of course, defied our expectations based on our own solar system, where all of the planets go around our sun in nearly circular orbits like phonograph grooves in a record.
Like a giant yo-yo in space, the gas giant swings back and forth across its solar system. That is like the Earth swooping 25 million miles closer to the Sun, then slinging past Mars, all the way out towards Jupiter every year. With the coming of spring, the Sun looms large in the skies over this hapless moon as the ice cracks and melts violently. Huge icebergs calve into a stormy and fast-rising ocean. For two preciously short periods, during the spring thaw and the autumn rains, the climate on this Earth-like moon is balmy and comfortable. At a distance of 93 million miles from the star, roughly the same distance as Earth from the Sun, the elliptical orbit of this planet and its moon crosses an area around the star some scientists call the Goldilocks zone. The conditions here are just right for life.
If you're too close to the star, then it's too hot. If you're too far away, then it's going to be too cold and everything's going to be icy. But then if you're right in the middle, it's just right.
Every star has a Goldilocks zone. Where that zone is depends on the size and temperature of the star. In our solar system, Venus marks the inner boundary and Mars the outer boundary. Earth and its abundance of life is right in the middle. The yo-yo planet passes through the Goldilocks zone twice a year. For 3.5 months during the spring as it races inbound, and again in the fall for 3.5 months as it hurtles back into the colder reaches of space. Could life survive the conditions outside the Goldilocks zone?
There could be life forms that are smart enough to hibernate, as do animals on the Earth during the winter season, If this sounds fantastic, I offer you the tidal zones on the Earth. On the tidal zones, life proliferates, of course, near the seashore, and they do so despite tides. The water coming in, covering many of the life forms, the water going out at low tide, and yet those species survive perfectly well.
The strange cycle of the yo-yo planet's orbit creates fleeting conditions suitable for life, but also for death. Some alien planets are even more bizarre. Imagine a world that has no star to orbit. Scientists speculate that our galaxy is teeming with rogue planets, adrift in the murky lanes of interstellar space. These are orphaned worlds, planets that are booted from their solar systems by the chaos of planetary migration. Astronomers call such worlds planemos.
Planemos are planets without a star. They're just drifting through the galaxy indefinitely.
What massive force would it take to kick a planet out of the solar system?
When a young star forms with a contingent of planets around it, many of those planets gravitationally interact with each other. They yank on each other, slingshot each other, so that one of them is ejected from the planetary system, voted off the island, if you will.
If you were, unfortunately, a resident on a planet that was kicked out by a collision or a near collision with another large object, you'd probably rapidly move out of the habitable zone.
There are hundreds of billions of these lost, wayward, poor, wandering planets out in our Milky Way galaxy with no parent star to warm them up.
Cold, dark, quiet. Because planemos have no sun, they are worlds without days or years. They keep vigil through an eternal night. Planemos are solitary wanderers, sentinels of the galaxy. Just because it's out there drifting in space doesn't mean a planemo is dead.
If the planemo is a rocky world, it could well have life on it.
A small rocky planemo without an atmosphere will slumber in extreme cold, far colder than the coldest winter day on our own South Pole. But a planemo large enough to retain an atmosphere traps the heat generated when the planet was first formed. It is the ultimate greenhouse effect. The heat and energy comes from the molten core deep inside the lonely planet. If the planemo is a gas giant like Jupiter, it may have a system of moons. The gravitational pull between the planemo and its moons creates friction, causing the interior of the moons to stay warm.
These moons could also have life on them, in the same way that Jupiter's moon Io has volcanoes and has a lot of heat energy being generated by interactions with Jupiter and the other moons.
If anything lives here, it will be single cells, like common bacteria found on Earth. Not complex life forms. Without a sun to provide photosynthesis, these tiny organisms derive their energy from the chemistry in the soil of the planemo, or its moon. On Earth, there are similar conditions. Colonies of bacteria are found deep within mine shafts in South Africa. They have no access to oxygen nor light, and survive entirely on the chemicals they make from the surrounding dirt. Their metabolisms are extremely slow, and they reproduce only once every 1,000 years. If life dwells on a sunless planemo, it could be organisms like them, marooned when their planet was young. While planemos slumber undisturbed, there are worse places to be in the universe. Like in the company of this lethal pulsar, some 980 light-years from Earth, in the constellation of Virgo. From afar, a pulsar looks like a blinking light. But up close, pulsars machine gun their surroundings with deadly radiation. They are no place for planets. Yet something interferes with the precision of this pulsar. One explanation is that the anomaly is caused by a planet. But many astronomers are skeptical that planets orbiting a pulsar can exist.
The reason that's a problem is because pulsars are formed in these incredible explosions.
When a red giant star explodes, a titanic fireball known as a supernova unleashes as much energy in 1 minute as our sun generates in its lifetime.
When a star goes supernova, the shockwave is so immense it's hard to imagine any planet surviving that.
When the cosmic dust clears, all that remains is the crushed core of the red giant, pulsing in the heart of an expanding debris field. Matter blasted from the colossal explosion falls back to the pulsar and forms a disk. Within this chaos, a new world arises, born of fire and destruction, a planetary zombie raised from the carcass of the former red giant star.
It's amazing that planets could form in that environment.
A planet orbiting a pulsar will give you the feeling of being in a disco bar with a very strong strobe light, which is the pulsar.
Radiation from this stellar beast breaks down the organic molecules needed for life.
The pulsar has these very strong magnetic fields that are being spun around as the star is rotating quickly, and it's picking up any material, electrons, protons, and speeding them up and slinging them out at high speed. So it's like a solar wind with a vengeance.
I can't imagine that there would be much of an opportunity for even simple life, microbial life, to emerge and to flourish on a planet around a pulsar. Largely because if you were in the pulse, you'd be severely energized, and if you were not in the pulse, you would be completely devoid of energy.
The discovery of pulsar planets shows how new worlds can form in the wake of a star's destruction. No matter where a planet arises, the process of its birth is fraught with danger. Sometimes, the violence is so great, the end of the world comes before the beginning.
There is a new planet out there, a planet we were not aware of existing before.
It is not just one planet. It is a new type of planet. Earth on steroids.
I like to call them super Earths. They're just like the Earth, except bigger, up to about 10 times the mass of the Earth. One family that the super Earths resemble just like our own Earth, continents, oceans. Some of them may be very dry, like Mars. And then another family that we call water worlds or ocean planets that are completely covered with water.
Welcome to Gliese 581c.
This planet was found by Michel Mayor, and it orbits with 2 other planets around a very small star.
It's only 20 light-years away, in the constellation of Libra, and is one of the smallest terrestrial planets found beyond our solar system. That doesn't mean Gliese 581c is small. It's still a super-Earth with 5 times the mass of our home planet. But it's the possibility of liquid water that excites scientists.
An ocean planet feels like being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, with no land in sight, just water, puffy white clouds, and blue sky above you. The winds on the ocean world are going to be similar to that of the Earth. So it will be a very good place to sail.
The weather's absolutely perfect. Every day you get a clear blue sky and the sun just stays in the same place. Now how's that for weather prediction?
No land anywhere, even miles beneath the surface.
This water layer would extend very far down, at least a quarter of the way down in the planet.
But as we dive deeper into the sea, the pressure builds. At 35,000 feet below the surface, we pass the point where the deepest oceans on Earth bottom out. We pass the 100,000-foot mark. The pressure is so great, water itself begins to take on surprising new forms. At a depth of 10 times the greatest ocean depth on Earth, we reach the bottom.
When you have a large amount of water, then at the bottom of an ocean, you will form very high pressure in excess of 1 million atmospheres. And that pressure will compress the liquid water, that is the ocean, into a state which we call ice 7.
No, it's not like ice in your refrigerator. The molecules of water that are in the ice in your refrigerator are kind of all jumbled up. But if you form ice under very high pressure, then the water molecules can become ordered, they can become aligned.
I can show you a crystal that is a very good analog to ice 7. This is halite, also known commonly as rock salt.
Ice 7 may exist within our own solar system. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, could possibly have a mantle of liquid water surrounded by a thick, icy crust. The pressure from the crust is so great that Ice 7 might exist deep within these uncharted seas. If we scale up and thaw out Europa, it could be a water world similar to Gliese 581c.
One could imagine that life could emerge on a water world. After all, water is essential to life on Earth.
Everywhere on Earth where there is water, there is life. You cannot find a sterile drop of water on Earth unless you put it in the microwave yourself.
On this water world, there could be bacteria or any kind of life in the ocean itself.
But not all of the super-Earths are water worlds teeming with life.
When we talk about super-Earths, we talked about two major families of mostly rocky with some water and mostly water with an endless ocean. But one has to add to those a third family of probably very rare super-Earths and Earth-like planets, which are called carbon planets.
A carbon planet is unlike anything we've ever seen anywhere. A place with an alien chemistry, but loaded with very earthly treasures. Throughout our galaxy, there are planets barren and poor and inhospitable. But science is on the trail of a new type of planet, an entire world of treasure.
In our own solar system, in our sun and in all the stars nearby, there's always more oxygen than carbon. But if we think of a place in the universe where there's more carbon than oxygen, then planet formation is very different.
Spectral analysis shows carbon to be far more plentiful, 26,000 light years away near the center of our galaxy. Planets that form here may contain a rich abundance of carbon. The morning sky on a carbon world would be anything but crystal clear and blue.
I'm picturing a yellow haze with black clouds of soot. And as you descended farther down in the atmosphere, I could imagine lakes that were made out of compounds like methane or gasoline. I'm picturing these bubbling, foul-smelling pits of black ooze, like an oil well.
With little or no water in the atmosphere, the air is made of carbon compounds.
Methane, butane, pentane, benzene, all these different kinds of carbon compounds that separate out when you refine gasoline. One day it might be raining benzene. The next day it might be raining butane.
Alien as carbon planets might seem, the air quality could be familiar to some.
The air in a very benzene-rich planet will resemble that of LA. A lot of smog particles that unfortunately we are quite used to from the exhaust of cars.
Despite the pollution, carbon planets could come with a sparkling upside.
You might see diamond because the planet may have substantial quantities of pure carbon that it's formed out of. And pure carbon, when you compress it, tends to form into diamond.
The secrets of exotic planets like these are waiting to be discovered all across the galaxy. But astronomers won't be satisfied until they find the Holy Grail. A planet like our own, one that sustains life, the next Earth.
People always ask me, do I think we're going to find another planet like Earth? And I answer, absolutely.
Every star probably has planets roughly the same size as our Earth.
We think that essentially every star has several Earth mass or super Earth mass planets. So if you have, say, 200 billion stars in the galaxy, that may mean there are 400 billion Earths in the galaxy or more.
400 billion Earths. The Kepler Space Observatory is the first instrument capable of finding one of these planets.
Kepler is looking at the constellation Cygnus in the night sky at 100,000 stars, taking picture after picture after picture, minute after minute. And the goal of Kepler is simple: to look for stars among the 100,000 that dim.
When a star dims slightly, it means a planet passes in front, blocking some of the light. How long the star dims and how much light gets blocked will tell scientists about the size of the planet and the distance from its sun.
A good analogy for this is looking for the dip in the light that you would see from a searchlight if a small moth flew across the searchlight. And so it's a really tiny dip in the light as the planet transits.
It is a very powerful technique because it allows you to discover planets that are even smaller than the size of the Earth, around stars similar to the Sun.
It is a technique that is changing the course of science.
We think we may be able to find a planet that is habitable in the next few years.
Scientists estimate the Kepler mission will find a minimum of 50 alien Earths.
One of the big questions that anybody looking for life beyond the Earth is facing today is, what if we don't recognize life even though we discover it?
Conditions on an alien Earth may cause life to evolve differently.
My hope is that we'll see some sign that will make our hairs stand up on the back of our necks.
Whatever that sign is, it will be the first chapter on the greatest scientific story ever told. For millennia, people have spotted mysterious objects in the sky. Most witnesses are ordinary, sensible people, startled at what they see. Many now report their encounters to government officials who deny any knowledge of UFOs. Conspiracy? Cover-up? Or an ominous miscalculation of the power of the unexplained? (1980), 140 miles outside London on the east coast of England. Woodbridge and Brentwater's naval bases under the command of the United States Air Force. Together they formed the largest tactical fighter wing in the world. The two bases were separated by a 3-mile stretch of heavy woods known as Rendlesham Forest. The backdrop for one of the most investigated UFO sightings in history. This is what it looked like just after midnight on December 27th. Woodbridge security supervisor, Sergeant Jim Peniston, rushed to the East Gate, where sentries alerted him to strange lights.
My first thought on it was an aircraft downing, a possible aircraft crash. There was a color scheme of red and yellow and some white light. That's the reaction they get with chemicals.
Peniston radioed back to the flight supervisor and was given permission to investigate. He and the sentries advanced into the darkness until they stumbled on a sight they could not explain.
The air, for example, had a feeling of electricity in it. My feelings at the time ran from confusion to disbelief. I could not understand for the life of me what this could be. The craft itself measured approximately 9 feet by 9 feet, triangular in shape. It had no cockpit, as far as I could tell. There was no windows, just this very highly shiny, black, glass-like material. And I think the most fascinating part of it, at least as far as I was concerned as the investigator, was the fact that this had identifiable inscription, symbols on the side of it.
Peniston says he approached the craft. It was warm when he touched it. Suddenly, it began to move, lifting up silently right before his eyes and disappearing into the night sky. Peniston claims he drew this sketch of the craft at a debriefing the next morning with the deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. The next night, Halt received word that the strange lights had returned.
Well, the base commander and I looked at each other quite in disbelief. And I said, well, we both agreed we needed to put this to bed.
Eager to debunk the entire affair, Halt collected a Geiger counter, night vision star scope, and a handheld tape recorder. Then, with a few men from the Disaster Preparedness Unit, he drove to the area where Peniston had seen the UFO. Soon, the portable lights they had brought mysteriously flickered and died. Halt, concerned for the safety of his men, ordered several of them back to the East Gate. With the rest of his unit, he walked into the forest checking radiation levels. He says they seemed unusually high. Suddenly, off in the distance, Halt spotted a glowing object. This is the actual recording Halt made of his UFO encounter that night.
Okay, we're looking at the thing. We're probably about 200 to 300 yards away. It looks like an eye winking at you. And the flash is so bright to the star scope that it almost burns your eye. There's no doubt about it. This is weird. There's something very, very strange.
And there we stood. Well, we didn't know quite what to think of that. But when we looked to the north, suddenly there were objects in the sky. And we watched this in awe. Suddenly the object came toward us at high speed. It moved directly toward us. I can't estimate the speed, but it moved very rapidly. Stop and send down a pencil-like beam at our feet. And just as fast as the beam appeared, it just clicked off, disappeared. I still have questions as to what happened. I really don't know what it was. I do know it was something strange, something that was controlled by some type of intelligence, and that's about all I really know.
2 weeks later, Halt described the incident in a one-page memo sent to the British Ministry of Defense. The British government never responded to the memo, but word of the encounter spread. 3 years later, UFO researchers pressured the Air Force commander to release the document under the Freedom of Information Act.
Well, he released it. And the very next day I got to meet BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, German TV, Japanese TV, every local radio station. They were waiting on my doorstep at home and at the office. It was just unbelievable.
News of the Rendlesham incident also generated enormous interest from UFO researchers and skeptics. Here was a case with highly credible witnesses, trained Air Force personnel. Tucson astronomer and retired U.S. Air Force pilot James McGahey is a UFO skeptic who investigated Halt and Peniston's alleged encounter. McGahey insists Halt mistook the beams from a lighthouse 5 miles away for a spacecraft.
That object that was winking at him, which is on the tape, is clearly the lighthouse. Now he's looking at the lighthouse, I think, with a starlight scope. Now remember, here comes this beam of light. He's looking at this light with 100,000 times intensity. What it's going to do is it's going to burn out the image in the center, so it's going to become black. And that's what easily explains the beams and these other things.
When Halt's tape is played against the flashing from the lighthouse, this seems to be the case.
Right in this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flash back there. There it is. Hey, I see it too.
I can't explain that. I really don't know. I never gave it any thought. I do know that the whole time we were out there, we could see the lighthouse. And the lighthouse was about 35 or 40 degrees off to our right from where this whole thing took place.
Did area radar operators confirm the UFO sighting? Halt says maybe.
They really didn't confirm they found anything, although later I found out that when they reviewed the tapes, they did find some things on the tape.
If he has a radar report, I'd like to see it, because I investigated this and I couldn't find one.
Skeptics also suggest the Rendlesham UFO might have been a meteor, bright stars, or a Russian satellite that fell out of the sky that night.
To me, this is just a case of where a number of people saw some lights, got a little excited, thought about UFOs, and all of a sudden everything they see is a UFO. The first night, it was a combination of a satellite reentry, a meteor fireball, and a police car driving around in the woods. The second night, it turns out to be a lighthouse, some microwave antennas, and some stars in the sky.
We had a controlled landing. Apparently, there was no crater. We also had a craft that was able to take back off with absolutely no sound, which tells me high technology, and maneuver back through the tree line, rise over the trees, hover momentarily, and then take off at incredible speed. It's just totally ridiculous to even consider that it was a Russian satellite or a meteor. Impossible.
In 1991, believing serious questions were still unanswered, the British government finally responded to the Rendlesham incident. Nick Pope, its top UFO investigator, reopened the case.
I've always felt that Rendlesham Forest is a case which displays a lot of important factors all drawn together. You have a multiple witness event. Those witnesses are trained military observers. The Defence Radiological Protection Service had no explanation as to why the radiation readings taken by Colonel Halt's team were so high. Undoubtedly, something very strange had happened there.
Pope requested further investigation. The British government said no and closed the file. Perhaps in part due to this fact, Sergeant Peniston arrived at the site at approximately 1 a.m. and re-emerged from Rendlesham Forest after dawn, but can only account for less than an hour of his time. Skeptics question how Peniston could make such an historic discovery and yet not report back to the base for several hours.
What we had thought was apparently only maybe an hour's worth of investigation time turned out to be 4 hours. I got a feeling that might have been the adrenaline. We were pumped up. at that point in time.
What is it that Penniston says he saw and touched that night? To this day, he is perplexed by the entire incident.
Something that can sustain a controlled flight, something that has mass, something that makes no sound, and something that can take off at incredible speeds back up into the atmosphere. Explain it. I can't.
Unknown forms in the sky surprise and alarm citizens below, sometimes causing governments to do battle with the unexplained. Belgium, the center of Europe, and the focus of one of the most famous UFO encounters in history. On the evening of November 15, 1989, police officer Francis Michelzik had completed a few hours of routine patrol in Anza Belgian village near the German border, when Michelzik says he looked up and became one of the first witnesses of the Belgian wave.
Nous avons observé une masse importante qui était dans le ciel.
We saw a large mass in the sky, a triangular mass with three lights oriented downward, about 200 meters from our police van.
Cet objet ne faisait pas de bruit et il était immobile.
The object was silent and immobile. This object did not correspond in any way to anything we'd seen before.
À ce que nous avions déjà pu voir dans le passé.
2 weeks later, Dieter Plumens, a member of the Gendarmerie, the Belgian National Police Force, heard over his police radio fellow officers nearby reporting a strange object in the night sky.
At first, when we heard our colleagues talking to dispatching, we thought they were crazy.
Plumens requested permission to investigate, and when he reached the edge of town, he says he witnessed an astounding sight.
We stopped right in front of the nursing home, and there was an immense object over our heads. The object had three lights at its extremities and a blinking red light in the center. At a certain point, I saw a small object leave the large thing, an object which was also flashing, which came straight down and then turned and flew around the back of the nursing home. After that, the large object transformed itself into a single light, and we followed it toward Germany.
Belgian radio and TV soon were filled with reports of similar sightings, prompting hundreds of calls to the office of the top UFO research group in Belgium, known by its acronym SOBEPS. Over the next several months, researchers documented more than 800 so-called close encounters. SOBEPS eventually published 2 thick volumes on the Belgian wave.
Specific characteristics of the phenomenon were reported by many people. We have hundreds of reports of people who mentioned something below a distance of 100 meters.
Then, on March 30th, 1990, the Belgian wave story took a dramatic twist. Near midnight, several police officers called a NATO radar installation with reports of a UFO. Within an hour, that facility and a second radar station were both tracking an unknown flying object. The chief of operations for the Belgian Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Wilfred de Brouwer, ordered ground command to scramble a pair of F-16 fighter jets armed with missiles. A supersonic high-tech cat-and-mouse game ensued. The jet's radar locked on to their targets 9 times. But with each lock-on, the object drastically changed its position. After an hour, the F-16s lost contact and returned to base. For weeks, the encounter was kept under wraps, but Colonel de Brouwer felt compelled to share what he knew. During an interview with a reporter from one of Europe's most popular magazines, Paris Match, de Brouwer described what happened. The story stopped the presses. Within days, de Brouwer called a news conference and told reporters from around the world what he knew and what he didn't know. This is what the pilots saw on their radar. The UFO appears as a diamond in the center of the screen.
What these pilots detected was well outside the normal flying envelope of an airplane. In other words, sometimes they had what we call lock-ons on a target, which gave a parameters varying from speeds between 150 knots till 990 knots. An acceleration which occurred in a few seconds. These speeds would be impossible to tolerate for a human being.
Colonel de Brouwer never suggested the mysterious flying craft was from outer space. He only said its speed and rate of acceleration were unexplained. Over the next few months, the sightings became more sporadic, and the Belgian wave came to an end. Did the skies over Belgium become a way station for alien spacecraft? If not, what did thousands of people witness? Physical evidence is the key to proving the existence of UFOs. The Belgian wave, despite hundreds of credible eyewitnesses, has produced only one piece of convincing evidence. This photo, taken by a civilian bystander in the town of Petit-Réchon. The photo was examined by former NASA scientist Richard Haynes, a specialist in vision, optics, and human perception.
My analysis of the Petit-Réchon photograph suggests very strongly to me that the object that was photographed does not obey laws of physics as we know them. Second point I would make is it's not a forgery. And finally, I think that there may be some clues in this photograph having to do with propulsion and lift.
Belgian scientists and skeptics tried to calm what they considered the UFO hysteria of the Belgian wave. A professor at the Astrophysics Institute at Belgium's prestigious University of Liège, Pierre Mega, decided to put the Petit-Réchon photo to his test.
We tried to reproduce this photograph, and we produced this picture, which is well, very close to the original picture. So I think the only way to go ahead and to try to understand more is to do as we did, to analyze the witness report together with the photograph and to see if everything is consistent. And there are so many inconsistencies that it's very hard to believe it's a true picture.
I don't see how someone could recreate this down at almost the grain level of the film. It would take a Steven Spielberg kind of a capability to do this in a technical laboratory.
The most convincing evidence for the skeptics' position involved the radar lock-ons by the F-16s. Belgium's Electronic War Center analyzed the radar tapes and found that the object descended below ground level at some points, a physical impossibility. The center concluded that all but one of the radar lock-ons were really caused by electromagnetic interference or unusual atmospheric conditions. Eventually, even SOBEPs agreed. But one major question remains unanswered and unexplained. Experts say that when ground-based and air-based radar track the same object simultaneously, the object is real. One of the lock-ons, a simultaneous tracking of the UFO by one of the F-16s and the ground radar station, has never been explained.
If I remember, it's lock-on number 9, which has some very weird characteristics. And these characteristics doesn't fit with atmospherical explanation, not at all.
Thousands of people still wonder if what they saw came from another world. Others ask if that single perplexing radar report is a clue to civilizations in distant galaxies. Questions for those who find answers in the unexplained. For years, the U.S. government seriously investigated sightings of UFOs. Thousands of cases passed through the hands of military and other government agencies. Most of these cases had rational explanations, The rest remain classified as unexplained. "50-year-old Polish immigrant and amateur geologist Stephen Mahalik looked forward to his weekend getaways alone in the Falcon Lake area, 90 miles east of his home in Winnipeg, Manitoba. This was Mahalik's favorite prospecting site. Around noon on May 20th, 1967, as he examined a quartz formation, Mahalik was distracted by some unruly geese. He looked up and was transfixed. He says he saw two cigar-shaped objects glowing red in the sky. The following is a recording Mahalik later made of what he saw next.
The size, was amazing. And here they coming down. With speed, I just can't describe. Amazing speed.
Mahalik says one of them stopped, suddenly accelerated, then disappeared. The other landed about 50 yards away. He watched in awe.
I hear shh, and I hear a high-pitched whistle of running equipment, pumps on high speed. When the thing landed, it was of gray-pink color. It's stainless steel, and it was pink hot. And I can feel the breeze on my face that thing is hot outside. There was my notebook, there was my pencil, so I sketched this thing.
Mahalik claims it was round, about 40 feet long and about 10 feet high. His curiosity took hold, and he approached the craft. He examined the outside of it, slowly touching the glowing skin with his gloved hand. It was fiery hot, nearly melting the palm of his rubber glove. Mahalik says the craft rotated, turning its grid-like exhaust vent toward him.
Suddenly,
the blast of hot gas from the vent knocked him to the ground, setting his shirt and undershirt on fire. The craft suddenly lifted off the ground, according to Mahalik, and soared straight up. He threw his burning shirts to the ground, dazed and in severe pain from burns to his chest and stomach. Mahalik says he wandered around for what seemed like hours before he managed to gather up his supplies. He found his way out of the woods, caught a bus, and later that night arrived back in Winnipeg. Still in pain, he rushed from the bus station to nearby Misericordia Hospital, where he was treated for first-degree burns. Mahalik claimed the blast from the craft had etched a grid-like pattern into his abdomen that matched the pattern on the exhaust vent. The next day, Sunday, he was spirited off to the St. Regis Hotel after convincing the managing editor of Winnipeg's highly regarded daily newspaper, the Winnipeg Tribune, that his extraordinary encounter was real.
At that time, I said, okay, as any newsman would have done, draw it. I gave him a piece of paper. I think that drawing has become the most famous UFO piece of evidence in the world today. He sat down, he drew it in front of me. I hid it. I talked to him. I called doctors, I called police, and I sure as hell didn't want the Winnipeg Free Press getting the story.
Monday's edition of the Tribune led with this headline: Mahalik soon became a sensation worldwide. What followed was one of the most intensely examined UFO cases on record. Over the next 2 years, Mahalik's burns kept recurring, and no one could explain why. He was examined by more than a dozen physicians in Canada and the United States, including doctors at the Mayo Clinic. An investigation by the Royal Canadian Air Force concluded that the abdominal burns sustained by Mr. Mahalik remain as unexplainable as to the source of the burn. The Mayo Clinic psychological report concluded that Mahalik was not prone to delusions, hallucinations, or any type of emotional disorder. Perhaps the most influential investigation was conducted under the auspices of the United States government. The chief investigator, physicist Roy Craig, is now retired and raises llamas on his Colorado ranch. His job was to examine UFO reports and find physical evidence.
We responded to the Falcon Lake report as soon as we could. Now, there's no value in seeing a landing site that somebody's had a chance to go back and prepare for me to look at. But if we could get back and find a landing site that had not been seen by anyone else or been altered by human beings, there may be something there that we could use as real evidence that he had a real experience. I mean, comparable with the appearance of human beings on Earth.
2 weeks after the encounter, Craig flew to Winnipeg and joined Mahalik on his first return to the landing site.
He guided us on what he said was a big search for the site. Actually, we just roamed around in haphazard circles, coming back to about where we started, and didn't go very far at all. He was trying to give us the impression of leading us on a search for a site, and we all concluded that the site probably did not exist.
With no apparent physical evidence, Craig classified the case as without merit. The American investigation was over. University of Manitoba astronomer Chris Rutkowski, believing the government reports left many questions unanswered, launched his own investigation. In 1994, he published The Falcon Lake Case, Too Close an Encounter, in the respected Journal of UFO Studies.
The terrain around the site is very rugged, very rocky. The brush is very, very dense. The trees all look alike. The rocks all look alike. And to a person who's disoriented, not feeling very well, it might be very, very difficult to find the exact site after some period of time has elapsed.
Skeptics, disagreeing with Rutkowski, also do not believe that Mahalik would make physical contact with an extremely hot object he assumed was a UFO. But this does not surprise his son.
He is the kind of fellow that fear is not in his vocabulary. Not that he's a fearless man, but that when he sees something he doesn't understand, he doesn't fear it. He just chooses to understand it.
Skeptics wonder why no one else saw the craft.
I talked with the people who were in charge of managing the fire tower. It was manned at that time, and the people were absolutely certain that there was no way that two vehicles like he described, glowing as they were, could fly into that space and out again. There was no way that that could happen without their seeing it. My conclusion on that case is that all the evidence that I found pointed toward hoax rather than a real experience. And not even a skillful hoax, a very inept hoax.
Mahalik became bedridden and incapacitated in the 1980s. Was this hard-working and devoted family man capable of crafting such a hoax?
For my dad to fabricate something as large as this would require more than I think he had. More than he has. He's a simple man. He grew up and lived a very straight, hard life.
This was no con man. This was a man who later went down to Mayo. They couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out. The doctor I had there couldn't figure it out. I am not about to be taken by anybody. This guy didn't take me. This guy was legit.
Stephen Mahalik never wavered from his story. He believed he had encountered a UFO. Roy Craig and the U.S. government disagreed, but they never classified the case as solved. The official report lists Mahalik's sighting as unexplained. In the past, the U.S. government routinely took a keen interest in reports of UFOs. Now, it denies any investigative role, leaving only questions for witnesses of close encounters with the unexplained. On the night of March 8, 1994, something strange was sighted in the skies over Holland, Michigan, on the southeastern shore of Lake Michigan. Witnesses were startled and called police.
There were at least 4 lights, and they were all flashing like okay, they were in a sequence. It was a kind of like a V.
There was like probably 4 or 5 lights, and they were all flashing right in a row from the top all the way down to the bottom.
The lights hovered over the outskirts of town near the home of Holly and Daryl Graves. Their 15-year-old son, Joey, was sitting in the living room watching TV.
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a light, and I looked out the window, and there was a
a round circle of light. I called my parents and they were sleeping. They didn't know what was going on, and my mom, she called 911 to get a cop or someone out here to look at it.
911. We were just wondering, have you heard anything about these lights that are flickering up here? It's different. I've never seen anything like it.
Okay, we'll have somebody check it out.
It looked like a sphere. The lights were really weird because they changed, but they kind of faded into a different color, so it wasn't like regular lights. So it was kind of weird.
We watched it up to about a half hour, just slowly moving south. We were just in awe, I think, about the whole thing. There was no noise. It was very peaceful out. We just stood there and watched this object. At that moment, Officer Veldhaus pulled in the driveway.
What I saw were two bright lights. Their movement was something that really caught my attention. Their speed accelerated, and then it slowed down again. And I decided to have our 911 dispatcher contact a radar operator in Muskegon, Michigan.
It was a clear night. It was about 10 p.m. I was alone on duty, and we had a call from the central dispatcher in Ottawa County, which is quite common for the police department to call us whenever they have any type of weather questions.
Weather Service, Muskegon. Hi, Muskegon. This is Ottawa County 911 calling. You getting anything weird down in the southern Ottawa County area?
Bouchon checked his radar for any images, what radar operators call returns.
I'm seeing 3 of those. They're very strong. These are huge returns. I've never seen anything like this. Not even when I'm doing storms. This is really weird. These are bigger than planes. They're about over the center of Lake Michigan, 3 of them in a triangle.
What was extraordinary about this case was that radar apparently detected the object at the same time witnesses saw it. It is a level of confirmation rarely achieved in reported UFO sightings.
Airplanes look like they're moving. These were just sitting still. And then a few minutes later, they would disappear from one spot and show up somewhere else. I really didn't know what it was.
Strange lights in the night sky, moving at otherworldly speed. The image confirmed on a radar screen. Was this finally convincing evidence of a technology far beyond our own? Had alien spacecraft paid a visit to Holland, Michigan? There was no explanation for these sightings. A reporter for the Muskegon Chronicle, Michael Walsh, decided to investigate for himself. He too found the story remarkable.
We've had past articles where people have reported some strange phenomena, especially at this time of year. But not once did we ever have any dual confirmations, visual plus the radar.
Talk about a meeting. Okay.
Others began looking into the incident, fascinated by the radar confirmation. A professor of natural sciences and, at the same time, the editor of the Journal of UFO Studies, UFO researcher Michael Swords met with radar operator Jack Bouchon.
We went into the radar room. This young fellow really knew how to use the equipment. He would show us the difference between a hard count of something like an airliner and a soft response of something like a storm cloud. And it was obvious this was an extremely competent operator.
Skeptics point out that Bouchon was still a Weather Service intern at the time of the sighting. California engineer and skeptic Robert Schaefer thinks he can explain what the images really were.
The National Weather Service says that they tracked a number of objects over Lake Michigan, but of course not everything that turns up on radar is a solid object. Radar is subjected to mirage conditions of various kinds.
Schaefer believes that the sightings over the lake can be explained by a natural phenomenon, which usually happens over Lake Michigan in the spring. Warm air moves over the cold waters of the lake. The layer of cold air trapped beneath the layer of warm air creates a mirror effect in the sky by bending the light. This effect is called a temperature inversion. One of the best-known investigators of UFO sightings, Philip J. Klass, is a technical journalist for Aviation Week in Space Technology and an expert on radar systems.
Ground radar, especially during temperature inversion conditions, the rays can be, instead of going straight out, they can be bent downwards, so where you get echoes from the ground.
We're trained to know the difference between temperature inversions and, for instance, precipitation, because they appear to be the same thing.
Class says that since Bouchon was using old linear radar, not the newer Doppler radar, the images were probably atmospheric tricks.
It is a weather radar. It is not designed especially to detect metal objects or aircraft.
These returns were not only hard returns, but they showed up in this geometric pattern. And that when, say, the lead return would move out into Lake Michigan, the other two would stay behind. Then they would move to reform the triangle.
In fact, according to Muskegon Chronicle reporter Michael Walsh, most of the UFO witnesses did report strikingly similar patterns, shapes, and sizes.
I believe that each of them sincerely believed what they saw was something extraordinary. That's not to say that it's extraterrestrial or paranormal. It may very well be a very physical manifestation of something that we don't yet know about.
There is no consensus on what the UFOs over Holland, Michigan might have been. Skeptics point to a temperature inversion and its effect on both the lights in the sky and the radar on the ground. Witnesses, including a Weather Service radar operator, say they know they saw something real. But what was it?
I have no idea.
Personally, I'm not sure what I saw either.
Well, it was a UFO.
I was like in awe.
Do these eyewitness accounts and the radar confirmation merit further investigation? The government answered that question long ago. It says no, leaving this encounter one that may forever remain unexplained. Since the 1940s, believers in the unexplained have charged the U.S. government with conspiracy and cover-up. In the 1990s, those charges concentrated on a super-secret military base. In the heart of the desert, on the outskirts of Las Vegas, sits Nellis Air Force Base. 85 miles to the northwest is Restricted Area 4808E, popularly known as Area 51, a jumble of mysterious hangars and runways in one of the most desolate places on Earth. Officially, it does not exist. Here, the U.S. tests its most exotic and advanced flying machines. The B-2 stealth bomber, the Blackbird, and the U-2. The Area 51 control tower identifies itself to area pilots only as Dreamland. There are no tours of Area 51. Instead, soldiers carry loaded machine guns with the authorization to use them. This base, shrouded in secrecy, has become for many the focus of the world's fascination with UFOs and its hope for contact with extraterrestrial life. UFO fans from all over the world drive the Extraterrestrial Highway, a lonely stretch of road that hugs the perimeter of the base to Mailbox Road. From this location, hundreds of UFO sightings have been reported. The vast majority have been explained as lights from the latest earthbound military technology. Some, however, are harder to identify. Author Chuck Clark describes a remarkable craft he says he has seen many times.
It can go from a hover to several thousand miles an hour and back to a hover instantly. It can make very sharp right-angle turns and sharper than right-angle turns. I've seen 120-degree turns at high speed. It appears and disappears in mid-air, things that normal aircraft don't do.
UFO buffs contend the U.S. is testing an extraterrestrial craft at Area 51. But skeptics and UFO researchers agree that Area 51 is a UFO bust.
Almost all the sightings I hear about happen at night. And at night, you can't judge distance. You can't judge easily height in the sky. You can't judge speed. You can't judge actual performance. What I think is that there are no UFOs there. There are no UFOs being developed there. There's no UFO technology there.
Today, the government does not investigate UFO sightings, but for years, they were of vital interest. Beginning in 1948, the U.S. Air Force began what became known as Project Blue Book, the government's official UFO investigating arm. But both skeptics and UFO believers say Project Blue Book was half-hearted at best.
As time went on, and especially after the year of 1952, Blue Book's mission was changed. It was changed from being a somewhat serious look at unidentified flying objects to be basically a public relations office to try to diffuse emotionalism that was occurring in the American public about this. So, because this was a rather unsatisfying task to the people at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, they tried rather continuously from the mid-50s onward to get rid of this task.
In 1966, the U.S. Air Force commissioned the University of Colorado to conduct a thorough evaluation of the UFO phenomenon. The Condon Commission, named after its chairman, Dr. Edward Condon, began an 18-month investigation that ended in controversy.
Condon was an eminent physicist who ridiculed UFOs. He didn't take it seriously. He didn't spend time on the project. So the project went wrong because essentially from the top, not the scientific staff, but from the top, it was designed to help the Air Force get rid of the UFO problem. Well, how could it be designed to do that unless it said UFOs weren't important and weren't serious and weren't a scientific problem?
Retired physicist and former investigator for the Condon Commission, Roy Craig, strongly supports the Commission's work.
We'd have some excellent reports come in with all sorts of proof that there was a strange vehicle there. And each bit of evidence that we checked out turned out to not be what it really sounded like to start with. And the evidence just plain got less and less. The more we learned about the case, the less mysterious it became.
The Commission considered whether UFOs were a threat to America's airspace, demanding military investigation.
There was no threats to our security, therefore they really didn't have to interject themselves in the investigation. They could leave this over to civilian agencies.
We don't have any national security defense against this anyway. And if these characters wanted to do something really overtly and catastrophically nefarious to us, this would probably gone on a long time ago.
The Condon Commission concluded that the government should stop investigating UFOs. As a result, in 1969, after 21 years and 15,000 UFO reports, including thousands classified as unexplained, the Air Force closed down Project Blue Book. But interest in UFOs remains high, despite the official position taken by the government. Was the government justified in terminating its UFO investigations? Most scientists and researchers, including astronomer Larry Chupik of Chicago's Adler Planetarium, say yes.
We don't find that the stories of aliens in some government hangar are true. We don't find pieces of spacecraft. I think when people look at the sky and they don't know what they're seeing, they tend to think of unusual things. And they've heard reports. So reports can stimulate them to make their mind see something they're not really seeing.
I don't reject the idea that there are flying saucers on Earth from elsewhere on the basis that has always been given that our universe is so vast that they couldn't get here and therefore they aren't here. We could not, because of our ignorance of our universe, say that other beings could not be here. I think it's arrogance to make that kind of statement on the basis of our current scientific knowledge. But that doesn't mean that I think they are here.
I don't believe we've been visited by extraterrestrials. I haven't seen the evidence for it yet. So we say the question is very much open and should be studied carefully.
For 30 years, I've been looking. I have yet to find a single piece of scientifically credible evidence to indicate that we have alien visitors. All we have are unexplained cases.
Have we been visited by extraterrestrials? Could the elusive evidence be found in a small number of mysterious reports that defy explanation?
almost all of them turn out to be things we as scientists can identify, even though most people couldn't. Now, those last few are always questionable because neither we nor the observers know what they are. These are the unexplained.
People will always stare at the sky and wonder about its mysterious images. They then will turn to their leaders for answers. The leaders turn to science. In the end, people have a choice. Accept the answers of science or embrace what lies in the vast reaches of the unexplained.
The vast expanse of Nevada's Badlands stretches endlessly to the horizon. Hidden within these mountain strongholds are some of America's deepest and darkest secrets. Secret aircraft and the other legends of Area 51. Among these sandstone canyons today, there's a new glimmer of truth. Shrouded in mystery, it's a story that demands to be told. These are the witnesses of one of America's most unusual UFO encounters in history. Navy veterans and a band of brothers that want you to know that what they witnessed is real. This is their story. Petty Officer Jason Turner served aboard the USS Princeton in 2004. His personal conviction for democracy and patriotism guides him in his search for the truth.
This is an actual event that happened, and I witnessed it.
Aviation tech Patrick Hughes, a USS Nimitz veteran, he speaks for his shipmates who choose to remain silent.
I'm one of those who has to see to believe, and obviously I've seen the evidence of this, so it exists.
Top Gun Air Intercept Controller Kevin Day and Fire Controlman Gary Voorhees, both from the Princeton, served together in the ship's Combat Information Center. They saw them first, whatever it is they are.
They wanted to show themselves, whatever they were. I don't think they wanted anything really to do with us.
They were literally breaking the laws of physics in my eyes.
These sailors are here for truth and vindication, and their story goes back over a decade to a time and place that marked a departure for all of them, both in their Navy careers, but also in their knowledge of the limits of man's technological understanding of our world. Looking out over the ocean toward the horizon, sun, sea, and sky form an endless vista, a never-ending cycle of tide, wind, and waves. Here, far from shore, strange events have unfolded. These stories stretch the boundaries of our imagination and challenge our beliefs. This is a true story of such events from the accounts of the sailors and naval aviators who experienced them. Professional military service members who want the world to know that what they encountered is real. Even more troubling, our military has no explanation. The answers seem to elude everyone, like reflections on the waves, yet they are out there. November 10th, 2004. 90 miles southwest of San Diego, California, in the Naval Operations Area, The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group and her complement of warships and the aircraft of Air Wing 11 are conducting a routine 2-week training exercise. Nearby, the guided missile cruiser USS Princeton has been tracking unknown aircraft that appear and disappear from her sophisticated Aegis radar screens. The Spy-1 Bravo radar is one of the most advanced sensors ever deployed. Princeton's main role is air defense of the strike group, and Operations Specialist Senior Chief Day is in charge of protecting the airspace around the Nimitz.
And my job was to man the radars and ID everything that flew in the skies. And I also sat a position called Anti-Air Warfare Coordinator, where if we ever had to go to war, I was the guy that was going to launch the missiles and kill shit. In addition to that, I was the Air Intercept Controller. When the Super Hornets take off the carrier, I'm the guy that takes control and takes them to the fight and gets them home safe. And there was a lot of experience in that room. The captain had 28 years, I had 18 years. And the Aegis ship is our newest weapons system afloat. It's got the Spy-1 radar system, the phased array radar system, and I was an expert on that.
Inside the Combat Information Center, Chief Day's attention is focused on a group of unknown aircraft on the Spy-1 screen. He's trying to identify them.
I was on watch, and we were probably 100 miles, I forget how far exactly that day we were, off the coast of San Diego southwest, kind of off the coast of Mexico, Baja. And I started to notice these weird tracks that were popping onto my radar coverage right around San Clemente Island. And the reason why I say they were weird, because they were appearing in groups of 5 to 10 at a time, and they were pretty closely spaced to each other, and they were 28,000 feet going 100 knots tracking south. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know, that's kind of odd. I mean, I don't know anything that flies like that. They weren't on the comm air routes, the commercial airline routes. I wasn't really that concerned about them. I didn't consider them hostile for any reason at all. Another watch or two, as I'm watching, the same formation appeared again. And over the course of 3-4 days, it probably counted up to that point, groups of 5 to 10 at a time. There were probably 50, 60 tracks by then.
Today, Kevin and Gary are still looking for answers. They've known each other for over a decade since their Navy days. Gary was a third-class petty officer and fire controlman back then.
I worked on the Aegis computer system on a CG-59 guided missile cruiser, the USS Princeton. I'm in charge of CC and data recording and maintaining and operating all the mainframes that run the system.
They're both becoming increasingly frustrated in their attempts to ID the strange aerial objects, which have no transponders and fit no known flight profiles.
The guys that work on the Spy-1 Bravo radar, they had come across and said they needed to take the system down for recalibration because they were getting clutter or ghost tracks, and they needed to recalibrate to get rid of them. Then once they did finish all that recalibration, bring it back up, the tracks didn't disappear. They were still there, but they were actually sharper and clearer.
They were doing diagnostic tests on everything we had to make sure it was not a system malfunction. And it turned out that it wasn't. These were actually real objects. I had the highest spy track quality possible on these contacts.
In this situation, I actually started recording on all 4 tapes at the same time. That way, it was a one continuous loop, and I was just replacing them as they were, becoming full.
We failed utterly to identify these things. It didn't meet any of the parameters for anything that was known.
In some cases, they seemed to descend from space and then suddenly plunge to near sea level in seconds. Coupled with the unidentified nature of the craft and lack of clearance, these extreme flight observations are very troubling to the crew assigned to protect the carrier group from aerial threats. Sunday, November 14th, morning. The Nimitz deck crew is busy launching FA-18F Super Hornets, helicopters, and E-2 Hawkeye early warning planes. The mission? Simulated air defense, or ADEX training over the Pacific. The winds are calm, the skies are clear, a near perfect day for flying. As they launch, the Black Aces squadron has no knowledge of events happening nearby.
In the back of my mind, that's when I determined I was going to become concerned about these objects. Is we were getting ready to launch a whole bunch of aircraft in that same piece of sky.
Fast Eagle climbs out to 20,000 feet and heads to the cap station about 40 miles south of the carrier. The cap is a rendezvous point used to form up with the other airplanes. The commander of Fast Eagle has over a decade in the air wing. His wingman for the day is a new pilot, a young officer on her first carrier deployment. She's paired with a senior pilot, her backseat weapons system officer for the mission. He will manage navigation and the advanced radar and targeting pods on the aircraft. Overhead, an E-2 Hawkeye from the Wall-Banger Squadron is on station directing the aircraft. Banger provides eye-in-the-sky command and control during carrier flight operations. Back in the Combat Information Center on Princeton, the mysterious objects are back. And today is the first time Senior Chief Day has jets in the air that can intercept the mysterious aircraft.
Seeing these contacts, Captain Smith orders me to intercept one of them. So I went back to the console. I picked the closest one that was to us, and I had intended to let the Hawkeye do the intercept because they already had control. It was just easier.
Day briefs the captain, and they agree to send the Hornets. The air intercept controller aboard Princeton, call sign Charlie, radios the Hawkeye and takes control of Fast Eagle.
Banger, Charlie. Charlie's a Banger, good. Banger, Charlie. Do you hold unknown air contact? Raw 270-48, 28,000 feet, bogey. Charlie, Banger, negative. Radar picture's clean.
The E-2 radar operators have been frustrated in their attempts to get a radar return on the unknown aerial target that Princeton is tracking. Even with their 24-foot radar dish, they can't get a lock on the object.
Banger, Charlie. Transfer Fast Eagle flight to Charlie Control, button 13. We have a real-world tasking for them. Charlie, Banger, roger. Fast Eagle, Charlie, stand by for real-world tasking.
Charlie, Fast Eagle, send it.
We vector towards that position in the sky and real quiet on the radio. I'm just giving them BRA calls, which is bearing range altitude, to these unknown bogey group. And basically I'm just telling their crew where the object is, the bearing from them, and the range from them, and the altitude so they can drive towards it.
Contact BRA 270-41, 20,000 feet, bogey, snap, 270, over.
Roger, bearing 270, 41 miles. 100, go trail.
100.
Stay.
Stay 12,000 pounds. Cleat, do you have it?
I'm trying to get a track on it now. They said link 16, but my radar picture is clean.
The next radio call takes everyone by surprise.
Fast Eagle 110, say loadout. 110, what's your weapons loadout?
Got a tactical action officer, the TAO, jumps on the radio. Her name was Lieutenant Elders, and she just point blank asked the Fast Eagle flight if they were carrying any type of weapons. And there was a stunned pause on the radio.
Wings clean, Princeton. We just have CADM training missiles, and they're not coming off the rail.
We're in an exercise environment, and the last thing we wanted to do is start shooting stuff.
Now the controllers have the pilot's undivided attention. Normally, the squadron doesn't carry live ordnance when training.
What do you guys think that was about?
What, about the loadout? I have no idea. Maybe it's drug runners or something. Yeah, it could be. Or a lost assassin out of SoCal.
I don't like this.
Fast Eagle, Charlie, contact BRA 160-34, 8,000 feet, bogey.
8,000. Committed. Your call. Continuing.
As Fast Eagle approaches the target, they see nothing unusual. Their onboard radars can't get a lock on the object.
Fast Eagle Charlie Bra 16010, 8,000 feet.
Roger.
Fast Eagle Charlie, merge plot.
Basically what the merge plot means on the radar, you got two objects in the same vertical piece of sky, so when I'm looking at the 2D display, it looks like a one radar blob now.
Confirm the object appears stationary.
I had it at 17.7. Showing, again, basically no airspeed on it.
Hey, you guys seeing us? What is that?
As the Super Hornets approach the target, they see a disturbance on the ocean surface. It's about the size of a 737, and it looks like something could be just below the surface.
100, anchor here, Angels 2-4. Roger. Charlie, Fast Eagle. We're observing something in the water here, possibly aircraft in the water at the merge plot, just north of our position, about 2 miles.
Charlie, Roger.
I'm descending to Angels 14 to take a look.
Do you think that's our unknown?
Man, not sure. Radar's clean.
As soon as he got to the merge plot position, the object that he was intercepting dropped from 28,000 feet down to 50 feet above the water in 0.78 seconds, as I found out later the next day.
As the Super Hornets get closer to the ocean disturbance, he suddenly spots another craft above it, a much smaller white object with an oblong shape, hovering, then darting just above the waves. The object is moving around erratically, seemingly focused on the white water. The shape is similar to a tic-tac. It's smooth like porcelain. It's not an airplane. Suddenly, the object begins to rise into the air.
Hey, this thing just turned on my nose. It's coming up. 2 miles.
The strange craft begins mirroring the turn rate of Fast Eagle.
Charlie 1 Fargate, 287, 2 miles, Angels 5.
The object is now at his 3 o'clock position as he continues to turn with it.
He's turning hard, 3,000 meters.
We had the external communications in the speaker in combat so everyone could listen to it. And the next thing I hear in the radio going, oh my God, I'm engaged, I'm engaged.
1,000 meters, he's southwest, Angels 8.
The commander is now about a mile away as he maneuvers his Hornet to get behind the unknown craft. It's about the size of an F-18, about 47 feet long, and it has no wings. As the dogfight unfolds, he quickly turns and dives to bring his jet's nose ahead of the object to close the distance. Suddenly, the tic-tac rockets past. It's gone beyond the horizon in the blink of an eye.
I saw it go 137. No tally.
That didn't just happen.
Say again.
Fast Eagle Charlie, sir, you're not going to believe this, but the bogey group is now back at your cap station. Over.
As Fast Eagle returns to the area of the ocean disturbance, the object is gone, and the sea is once again calm. Soon, they land on the ship. Back on board Banger, the flight crew has been listening to the radio transmissions from Fast Eagle The crew has been tracking the intercepts on their advanced display systems called the CEC. One of the radar operators, who wishes to remain anonymous, describes hearing the fear in the pilots' voices, and he knows this is no drill.
I had a good friend who flew on the Hawkeyes. We've been calling him Roger to protect his identity, because he didn't want to come forward at this time, but he wanted to contribute to the story to verify that it actually happened. So there were 5 people in the airplane. Roger would have been sitting in the radar officer seat, which is towards the back middle of the plane. To the side of each one of them, or behind them, depending how the chair's rotating, is a window.
Suddenly, his attention is drawn to something outside the Hawkeye. He and the entire crew watch in disbelief as a tic-tac object suddenly forms up on their E2 and then just as quickly shoots away from sight. The crew is left in disbelief. As Thanger returns to the ship, the crew is shaken. The highly unusual events are troubling, but what happens next has haunted them to this day. U.S. Navy officers quickly arrive and escort the aircrew to a secure space on the ship. As the crewmen begin to take off their flight gear, an officer begins the debriefing by telling them this event did not happen, and they are given non-disclosure agreements to sign. They are warned to never discuss this event again.
Again, we're preparing for the air defense exercise. Now we got all the squadrons launching off the carrier because they're all up going to do their functional check flights.
Senior Chief Day watched in disbelief as the tic-tac UFOs reacted to the incoming fighter jets.
All the objects in the sky, they all dropped out of the sky from 28,000 feet down to 50 feet.
Based on the Spy 1 Bravo radar system, the object descended at over 24,000 miles an hour.
It was unbelievable because normally what would happen if a normal aircraft did that? First of all, it would fly apart. It wouldn't be able to withstand the G-forces, and there would be multiple sonic booms. It would be boom, 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 and this did not make any sonic booms.
From what I observed, I saw that it went from, right around between 25 and 30,000 feet down to sea level and below sea level.
Contact. Tag number 042.
Below sea level was confirmed to me by the actual sonar techs that were in combat, in communications with other techs that had said they had an active track on it under the water. They're talking with their sonar guys on the sub that was with us, and I mean, I was told directly that it did go underwater. It went from being in the air to underwater. From what they were saying, it was going averaging about 500 knots under the water. So it did slow down when it hit the water, but it didn't affect it inertially.
After the intercepts, both Kevin and Gary climbed up to the ship's bridge wing to get a better view of the objects through the binoculars.
We go up to the bridge wing and look at them through the big eyes, which is heavily magnified binoculars that are out on the bridge wing of the ship.
Even when I was off watch, I was usually up in combat anyway, and I was sitting at the console. I just picked the closest object to us, and I got the relative bearing from the ship, slave over to the relative bearing of about the right altitude, and saw this white light in the sky.
The movements were smooth to erratic. They just moved from one point to another. It was always a very sharp and clean movement. It always felt like a constant speed, not like speeding up. Just it needed to go to that point, and it decided to do it at this speed. And then it would just go from nothing to the speed they were going to go, and then stop at the next point.
Meanwhile, back on the Nimitz, aviation tech Patrick Hughes is working to secure the classified data recorders from the Hawkeye that encountered the tic-tac.
We pull out the hard drives. We call them RMCs. We call them bricks because they physically heavy like a brick. But they contain the software to run the airplane. And they also record a lot of the data that the aircrew sees during the flight. So we take the removable stuff, we take it out, we go downstairs, back to our shop.
Patrick's job involves tracking the chain of custody of the hard drives.
Then we open up the safe, put them in the safe. We've got tracking sheets so we know what RMCs are, what airplane. We know who signed them out, who put them in the airplane, who took them out of the airplane.
As he gets ready to wrap up the mission, there's a knock on the door.
Our commanding officer's there, two other guys in flight suits, who I'm assuming were Air Force officers, because pretty sure that's the insignia they had on. But they were not on the ship earlier. I did not see them come on the ship, so I'm not sure how they got there. But the skipper basically said, I need the bricks off the flight. We opened the safe, we put them in the bags. He took them, he took his two anonymous officers and left.
The officers, with the classified hard drives in hand, soon board an HS-60 Seahawk helicopter and leave Nimitz. Soon thereafter, Petty Officer Voorhees has his own visit by unknown officials on the Princeton.
Once they landed and everybody got off, then about maybe 20 minutes later, I got called in to have all my data recording tapes turned over. And then also told that I needed to reload CEC because it had been wiped. So it was, so I turned over all the tapes, and then they also said if there's any even blank tapes to erase anything else that's in the shop. Well, they were plainclothes people that came aboard on the helicopter. It was my chain of command that took control of the tapes from me. The helo left with them after that, so because we went right back to flight ops.
The link between the Tic Tacs and these men is unknown. How they became aware of the UFO encounters and how they arrived so quickly on board after the event is also a mystery. The video you are now watching is the actual gun camera FLIR footage of the Tic Tac taken by a later flight. This is the first video ever released by the U.S. government showing military planes engaging UFOs. The advanced targeting pod, known as ATFLIR, works in both TV mode and infrared mode. The film reveals no control surfaces, no exhaust plume, a uniform heat signature, and no visible means of propulsion. Gary and his shipmates saw the FLIR film on their consoles and on the secret LAN aboard the Princeton.
It was a much clearer video. You could see the shape of the ship. You could see it, moving. I tried to go and get a disc to come make a copy of it, and by the time I got back, it was already off of our hard drive, off the secret LAN. No access to it whatsoever.
Petty Officer Jason Turner also saw a much higher resolution version of the FLIR film showing strange appendages extending from the object.
But it did have some protruding at the bottom of it. I couldn't tell if they were curled back or straight down.
Jason says the video was approximately 10 minutes in length and much longer than the video that has been released.
I saw this video playing and I'd ask him, is this what we're training, or what's part of this training that we're going through? And he said, no, this is real life. And when I saw it, it was a very clear image, a very clear video, and this thing was going berserk, like making turns, like it's incredible. The amount of G-forces that it would put on a human that this thing was doing. The jets were like trying to trail this thing, and it would just run off and leave them. It would just poof, gone, and then it would come back, and then you would see it, and then it made a maneuver, like they were chasing it straight on. It was going with them. This thing stopped, turned, and just phew, gone. That's the only way to describe what it looked like.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
Just 11 years later, fighter jets from USS Roosevelt filmed this anomalous object in 2015.
Well, if there's look at this thing. It's rotating.
Like the Nimitz encounter, they too were conducting routine training when fleets of UFOs were encountered by the pilots. The Nimitz encounters remained cloaked secrecy for over 13 years. The first-hand testimony about UFO sightings is practically unheard of from military service members. Thanks to the brave and honest accounts of the sailors and naval aviators who have come forward to relate their experiences, and of the remarkable videos they filmed that day, the silence has been broken.
I dealt with this all on my own for many, many years, and it was not a very pleasant journey to go through, because no one really believes you. But now things have changed, and anyone out there that's struggling with this and wants to reach out, there is now a group that you can reach out to and get help and support and vindication.
It's honestly been a little relieving to be able to actually talk about it and how important that event really was, and not just keep blowing it off. There's people out here that really need to know and want to know, and you have the support of me and Kevin and my other shipmates that have come forward and decided to talk about it.
My role is to describe the story and convince people that yes, this event really happened and these objects were really real, but what they are, I have no idea.
It is something. I want to know what it is. That's the whole reason I chose to come forward to contribute to the story, because there is a story here, there is more information here. And the more of us that talk about it, the better chance of the full story coming together.
And it's vindication for us that other people are looking into it, and we finally tell our story and people listen.
If you need to get a hold of us or would like to talk to any of us, Kevin, me, or any of the other guys that have come forward, there'll be an email address at the end of this video that you can contact them and they can get a hold of us.
If you or someone you know has witnessed unknown objects from military ships or planes, please contact us at the address on your screen. You can remain anonymous. As we strive to understand these encounters and come to terms with what they mean, there's something far beyond the horizon and the limits of our comprehension waiting for all of us.